You're all set.
Hey, good morning. Welcome. I'd like to call the meeting to order. It is 9:15 a.m. on August 1st. Stephanie, would you please take attendance?
Of course, good morning, everyone. Ava Bermudez Zimmerman is not joining us yet. Ellen McKitterick,
Here.
Alice Pritchard,
Here.
Michael Saltis,
Here?
and Holly Williams. Holly,
Holly, is that you?
doing call roll?
Did we hear Holly?
Her phone is still muted.
Yeah.
I don't know if the mute button works when it's on the phone. And here comes Ava.
And Ava.
Here, can you hear me now?
We can
Yes.
hear you. Thank you, Holly.
Yes, thank you, Holly.
Okay, you're welcome.
Good morning, Ava.
Morning. All right,
All right.
all set?
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. I'd like to welcome and thank the members of the public for joining us this morning. I'd like to ask the committee for a review of the July 6, 2023 minutes and a motion to approve those minutes.
I'll make a motion for so moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Yes,
One abstention.
I would
Okay.
like to abstain since I was not present. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The motion carries. Let's move to the Locke, would you please lead the discussion on the revisions to the finance and accounting policies?
Certainly, Mike. Well, I'm Locke, the Assistant Controller from the Finance Department. I wanted to thank the committee for letting us present this finance policy document over with the Policy and Personnel Committee. Let me share my screen. Can you see my screen?
I can see your screen,
Yeah.
Love.
Okay. All right. So we presented the finance and accounting policies last week to FAC. So I know I see a couple of familiar faces. I'm sure you've seen this before. So I'll try to be brief as I go through it. We wanted to share this with the Policy and Personnel Committee prior to bringing it to the board. This is an annual exercise that we do. We take this opportunity to enhance our policies for various different reasons. This year, there weren't a lot of changes except to reflect any updates made during the year through our finance operations so that they could be reflected into the policy itself. First, we updated, and the first update was introducing the concept of delegate for roles and responsibilities. Last month, the board approved a resolution to allow Aaron, our CEO, to temporarily delegate approvability when necessary. Delegation, or having a backup just in case someone is out, is a standard in any operation, especially the finance world. Previously, we had named specific staff positions throughout the document, citing who could step up and fill the role if somebody was out or sick or something. But within the policy, that became overly wordy. It could possibly put us in a different situation where we're maybe out of compliance if that person, that backup, was out for the day. We felt like putting it in an overarching general spot at the beginning of the document accommodated and addressed all those issues. So at the end of the day, it was important to have the policy itself followed by the authority, and it was defined in the delegate. We defined the word delegate in the roles and responsibilities section at the beginning of the policy. The next biggest update we made was our accounts payable policies. So in April, we took a big step where our accounts payable platforms were updated. We previously were paying our bills through Bank of America. Bank of America chose to retire or stop those services. So we switched gears and went through Bill Direct. We used this opportunity to update from QuickBooks Desktop and QuickBooks Online at the same time. Not only was QuickBooks Online on our radar to be kind of our next update, but because Bill Direct worked much more seamlessly with QuickBooks Online, we decided to make that change at the same time. So that impacted our policy, especially when we talk about approving our expenses. Previously, we had an expenditure request form in our ERF process that documented approvals by email. That allowed us to track all the activity and all the approval steps. But with Bill, it's much more seamless. All the approvals are kept in the workflow inside the program. It seamlessly turns that transaction into something we can pay directly out of the system. So we wanted to recognize that efficiency, and we made any citations to the old ERF process and changed it to update to what it is today. The next slide is about establishing our fund recovery policy. Last month, as you know, we launched and kicked off our fund recovery efforts. So therefore, we had to acknowledge and put in a policy in place. So we don't have much history because we did just kick off last month. And we wanted to put in a policy that was considered to start. We want to review this every single year and change as necessary. You can see the percentages go up. What that means is it's to reflect, as you could assume, is the longer a debt or a collection stays out there, the less likely we're going to be able to collect on it. So this policy here kind of talks about the different phases we have. The first 1 to 4 months talks about our internal Connecticut paid leave collection activity. We feel like to start off that 90% is a good number to start with, and that you'll see that number grow. The biggest number that, the number that we kind of started with was the 95% when we do send it out to an outside fund recovery vendor. In talking to our fund recovery vendors, it was told that they anticipate on collecting 5% of it. So therefore, we use that basis to document a 95% reserve during that phase. And then once it becomes too stale, they shared that after 17 months, that's kind of their marker for it to be uncollectible. So the 100% there reflects that. Other changes to the policy, we added an actuarial reporting requirement. Since last year, we established a quarterly cadence to do a quarterly update after the grace period of all the contributions coming in. And then most recently, we did an annual report. So we've had 2 so far with our latest actuaries. This cadence was important enough for our to monitor the ongoing solvency of the fund. And it was important to document that with all of our other statutorily required reporting requirements. So you'll see that section added to the reporting requirements. We also aligned our inventory of assets deadline to the end of the fiscal year, just to keep things consistent with doing things for fiscal year end. We also updated the administrative fees on how we base that amount when budgeting. Going in, the program was basing the amount based on the percentage of contributions. As we know, that number could change. It fluctuates much more than what our fixed expenditures are. So we took the advice of, that advice and reviewed it, and now wanted to document that we base our administrative fee, that revenue, into our operating account, basing it on the fixed expenditures rather than a fluctuating contribution number. We also removed the seed funding language as it's no longer applicable. As of October last fiscal year, we handled that and paid off that payable amount. So because it's no longer applicable, that section's been removed. The bond repayment language does still sit there. And lastly, we wanted to reference any penalties and interests. We wanted to cite other documents that kind of dictated what policy we had in place for penalties and interest. With our recently launched fund recovery efforts, we have to cite our policy, and because it's a finance effort, it does need to be recognized in our finance and accounting policy. But because in case anything changes down the road, we wanted to have a fluid, seamless way to not only to cite it and then refer to it in I guess, the parent document of where it exists. That concludes my presentation. Does
Okay.
anybody have any questions?
Questions or comments for Locke?
My question is, how do I unshare?
Huh, I have one question for you, Locke. Just do our auditors or actuaries have any input into these policies or suggestions, or is this purely an internal review?
The policy itself is an overarching kind of we just want to establish the schedule. Did they have input on the policy?
Yes.
Are you talking about the fund recovery policy piece? Or are you just
No, our finance and accounting policies in general, like there's accounts payable policies, for example, one of the items. I'm just curious whether or not the auditors make any suggestions for improvements, or is this strictly our own internal review?
This is an internal review for policies that circle our current procedures. We speak and bring this to our auditors of public accounts. So this is what it addresses. That's the audience to which we write these policies for. I think we could take this back, and if we want, we can definitely share it with our actuaries to see if they have a take to it before we bring it to the board.
Well, I'm not suggesting that. I was just curious, you know, when you get to, we're not the first ones to have finance and accounting policies, right? So I was just wondering if we received the benefit of their experience in creating or reviewing ours, but I'm not suggesting additional steps.
So I can jump in. When we first created the policies, we did look at sort of some of the policies that other quasis and other agencies have. And many of us get the auditors of public accounts reports. So we know what they pay attention to and try to make sure that we are on the good side of the things that they pay attention to. Locke has previous state experience, so some of the rest of us. And so, as Locke said, they're definitely our audience. The auditors of public accounts in particular tend not to be willing to give direct advice. There may be things that get discussed and that we can glean from, but they usually take the position that they're there to be the outside looking in, and so don't usually feel comfortable kind of weighing in on things that they themselves will later have to review. So it's all done in conversation and awareness and paying attention to kind of pitfalls that other agencies have fallen into that we try to avoid.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments for Locke? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to Michael. Would you please lead the discussion on the revisions to the private plan policy?
Absolutely. Good morning, everybody. Last month in the committee meeting, we had shared a revised document of our private plan policy. So the sort of process for an employer to apply and then manage a private plan instead of the public program. Last week, Stephanie shared the presentation that was shared in that meeting, and I'm going to share an even more condensed version of that in just one second. So this is basically a summary in one page of the intent of those changes to the private plan policies. It's meant to be a general refresh, just basically make the document more user-friendly and sort of use our experience of about 2+ years of approving private plans and sort of seeing them in action, removing some out-of-date sections, including portions about an interim period that was all sort of 2021 related, adding some requirements about denial of new private plan applications due to a lack of compliance in the past. Requiring employer contacts to be up to date. This is sort of we're learning from experience. Some employers aren't keeping us up to date when they do have changes to their contacts. Specifying that a vote should occur for the private plan within 6 months of the effective date. So that's a meaningful vote of the current employees who would be, subject to that private plan. And then potential penalties for continued submission of contributions of employee contributions when they're covered under private plan, because we should not be receiving those. They are exempt from the contributions. So that was sort of high level what the intent of those changes were. I have spent the last month reviewing the policy document over and over again, and that's a dangerous process to follow because I always find something I want to change. That A should be a the, or instead of saying to review, I should say in order to review. So I tend to wordsmith way too much, but I did spend the month doing some work on that. And I did identify 2 additional items that I added to the language in the policies. Happy to share the exact language if we want, but one is essentially calling out that one of the reasons I mentioned above, you can deny private plan applications due to lack of compliance, specifically calling out that misuse of employee funds is one of those, items that would be a lack of compliance. And that could be, continue to take money from employees and then also failure to refund that money to employees when we tell you, we give the money back to the employer and ask them to provide it back to the employees. They need to follow through on that. That is a misuse of the employee fund. So if they fail to do so, that could be a reason to deny their private plan in the future. And then also just adding a number of slight revisions to the plain language guide that are all really intent to be instructional. One of the things that happens, so to sort of give way too brief a overview of the process, one of the items that employers have to give to employees is the plain language guide. It's essentially 5 or 6 pages that at a very high level talks about what the private plan provides. They have to provide it to employees prior to the vote, at least 2 weeks prior to the vote. Then the vote happens, then they submit the application to us. When there are mistakes in that private that plain language guide, the employer will be required to make those revisions, share it back with employees, hold a new vote. So it's sort of not the most efficient way to do things. So we really want to make sure that our instructions in that guide are as clear as possible to employers so they can get it right the first time. We have a number of applications where it's sort of, they update 9 of the 10 places we told them to. Is that sufficient? Does the employee understand what they are getting, or do we make them hold a new vote? So we don't want to have that happen and have to sort of force a new vote simply because someone didn't understand what they needed to do. So we really want to make sure that language in the instructions was as clear as possible of here's what you need to update and here's the options for you. So those are 2 recent modifications since the last time you saw it. The goal would be to share the full document with the board for next week's board meeting, have them posted for notice and comment from the public, and then official adoption in about 2 months at the next available board meeting. But before we get there, happy to take any questions, comments, concerns. I know the committee did receive the sort of earlier version of revisions last month. If you had an opportunity to review it and have any concerns or questions or any feedback at all, happy to take that this time.
Questions or comments from Michael? Okay, hearing none. I guess we'll see that on the board agenda for next week, right?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, moving on. Aaron, would you please lead the discussion about changing the time of future committee meetings?
Thank you so much. So we alluded to this after, I think at the last meeting or afterwards, but we had originally had committee meetings at 9 at the request of Britt Marie Cole Johnson. We had moved it to 9:15. Britt Marie has stepped away from her board responsibilities. So we want to just take the opportunity to ask the board members if you wanted to move it back to 9 a.m. We had some perfectly FOIA compliant housekeeping emails, but I didn't get a consensus. So I figured we may as well just do it today. We did get confirmation from the Freedom of Information Commission. We can change the start date of the committee meetings with 30 days notice and still have the remaining committee meetings be counted as regular meetings, which makes life easier. So really want to go with majority rules, whether you want to start at 9 or start at 9:15. Just wanted to give that opportunity to you guys to make that call. So that's really
Okay.
the question in front of us.
I know my response was, I'm flexible either way, 9 or 9:15. I do think, and correct me, isn't the default for the other committees, is it 9 o'clock?
Yeah, everything else was at 9, and we had just moved it back 15 minutes at Britt Marie's request.
Yeah,
And so I know it took me a very long time to not sign in, thinking, where is everybody at 9 o'clock? So, so it's really just convenience for people.
Well,
I know
maybe-
we all work around it, but sometimes, it's easier to start at 9 so that you have the rest of the morning free. Sometimes it's easier to start at 9:15 if you have other early morning requirements you have to maneuver around.
Well, maybe, let me ask this, is there anyone, like Britt Marie, it was a hardship for her to start at 9. Is there anyone else on our committee for whom it would be a hardship to start at 9?
No, not for me.
Yeah, this is Holly. It's fine. Either time is fine.
Alice, I know you had your hand up.
I was just gonna say the same thing, that 9 was fine.
Okay. I feel like we
Okay.
have Ava, is 9 o'clock with you? I think you're the only one we haven't heard from.
Sorry, I stepped away quickly.
Sure, we just, is not, as a 9 o'clock start time okay with you?
It works. I'm sorry, I had a little cough attack.
No
It
worries.
does work.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds like we've got a consensus. I think I put a vote on the agenda, which could
We need
consider this a
someone to
vote.
make a motion to,
I'm happy to make the motion.
okay, the motion to move future starting times for our policy and procedure committee to 9 a.m.
And I'll say,
So moved.
All right, we have a second?
yes, second.
Okay,
Okay, great. Thank you, Ellen.
any discussion? No. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you. Going forward, we will meet at 9 a.m.
Terrific. We will update the calendar and notify the Secretary of State.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Okay, let's move on. Is there any old business anyone would like to discuss? Hearing none, is there any new business anyone would like to discuss? Hearing none, moving to adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Hi.
Opposed? Abstentions? Yeah, the motion carries. It is 9:39. Thank you for your time this morning, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
You're
Bye,
right.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.